So Scott, why did you make a career change from sales to marketing? I'm curious because I saw that on your LinkedIn profile.
Um, that's a funny question. Uh, I mean, the honest reason is, at the time when I was out of college, I um, I actually wasn't. I didn't think I was that good at sales, and I didn't feel like I was very confident on the phone. So, so basically, I felt like marketing aligned more with my skills. Um, the the thing I think the thing was back then. I think it would be different now, but back then I worked at a company called Yodel, which was like they sold to like SMB. It was like a really it was an aggressive type of sale. Like it was a lot of cold calling.
Yeah.
You're a little bit more aggressive than maybe some of the enterprise selling,
Mm,
and I just wasn't good at it. And the other thing was, at the time I was just out of college, and the concept of like someone buying something for thousands of dollars just like didn't register with me. So I was in college. I barely, I bought cheap stuff. I never bought anything that was $1,000. So it's funny. I was selling marketing software for like these small businesses, and now
interesting.
it's funny because now if you ask me to sell that, I'd be like, "Ugh, $12,000 a month? That's a joke." Like the
Yeah.
value you're getting from it, right? I'd be able to sell so easily, but back then I had no conception of buying something like that. So I think every time I got on the phone, I was like, I was like, oh, like $1,200. Like, oh man, like no way they'll buy this, like this, like so. I think I just didn't have the belief, even though it made a ton of sense. So that's kind of why I switched. And I think I also intermediately did some roles in sales development, which I did really like. But I noticed myself when I was an SDR, um, leaning into the to maybe some of the other aspects besides calling. Like I loved writing the email copy. I loved testing. I loved using the
Mm,
data to like make decisions,
yeah.
and also using tools like we use SalesLoft, and doing the automation, doing the reporting, and like I liked all that stuff. So a lot of my like what I liked and what I was good at aligned with marketing, right? So
Right.
that's kind of how I veered off. I realized that my strengths were really in some of the more marketing focused tasks.
That makes sense. Yeah. Especially so it's kind of like you found your passion over time based on the things you wanted to do in regards to tasks.
Yeah, and it's funny. I actually, after my first sales job, I did a Strengths Finders test, and it was really interesting. And I recommend people to do this, but maybe in general, even if they're thinking about like doing a different career, or just it's just interesting to get these data points. And if you looked at like my strengths and like weaknesses, it basically said like don't do any like based on your personality, don't do any type of job that's like aggressive or something like
Right.
confrontational. And I was doing a job that was like extremely and not all cold calling is like that, but like this job, it was like you were aggressive. And so it's funny, like after doing that job and not enjoying it and not succeeding in it, and then like seeing that strength finders test, I was like, oh man, I wish I took this like 6 months
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
Maybe I could have like directed myself. But I think it's important, yeah, to like I think part of it, like enjoying things is being good at it. So like aligning with jobs that align with
Right.
your skills already. I think that's a better recipe for success and happiness in a job.
Yeah, and I see marketing and sales, they do go hand in hand. And I've seen marketing professionals, they'll end up starting in sales and end up in marketing and vice versa. I've seen people start out in marketing, but they end up going to sales just because they love the task. They're more passionate about it. There's certain factors of it that they just enjoy more and end up falling in love with it. So I think that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that stuff.
Yeah.
And I have another question for you. So, Chris Walker on LinkedIn, he's big in the demand generation space, right? And I knew demand generation from like a distance. It wasn't like what was it wasn't as popular as SEO, social media marketing, um, copywriting. Well, even copywriting wasn't as popular back then too. Copywriting, I feel like it's getting a lot more trendy these days. And finally getting the value that it deserves too, just like demand generation. And when I started seeing B2B marketing professionals liking Chris Walker's LinkedIn videos, I've been seeing demand generation all in my feed, right? And that's why I wanted to bring you onto the show, because you are a demand generation expert, at least in my opinion, and from based on everything we've talked about from previous conversations. And I just know that there's a lot of B2B marketing professionals that don't fully understand demand gen. And that's why I wanted to bring you on the show, because this is a very hot topic and you are a guru in the space and I love what you're doing. But my question, I guess, is what do you love about demand generation?
It's a good question. There's a couple things I really like. Um, I like that it's essentially sales with words, right? Like it like a lot, like you mentioned copywriting, like a lot of demand gen is copywriting. I think for someone like me who's like goal oriented, likes hitting a number, um, demand gen is like a great place for that. I love all aspects of marketing, but I think especially people coming from like sales and sales development, like it, it's more of a it's more of a performance based marketing, and I think that's fun. I think it's really fun to use both quantitative and qualitative skills, which I think are both important, right? Like
Hmm.
the whole point of demand generation, right, is to like either, I guess, in a B2B setting, generate leads that turn into meetings that turn into pipeline that ultimately turns into revenue. So it's extremely like revenue focused. Your work is very um it's it's well, not all of it, but a good amount of it is very clear on like what's the ROI and the impact it's making on your business.
Hmm.
Um and so it's really fun to be both creative with like your copy and the ads and just like the strategies you deploy, and then at the same time be very like data driven and track everything and look at the numbers and optimize and A/B test and do all those things. So I think it's really the best of both worlds in marketing. Um, and then it's exciting. Like for me, I still am always like, I guess less now, but when I started, I'm always like amazed at like when someone like reads something like an ad or a landing page and then like converts. I'm always like, holy crap, like I can't
Yeah.
believe like these words convinced them to talk to our sales team. And I think it's really gratifying when you run a campaign or you do any of these things, you test, and then like you see results. Like it's almost like I like to think of it as like scoring a goal in soccer.
Yeah.
I used to play soccer, um, and booking a meeting through a campaign or whatever it is you're doing is like scoring a goal, right? It's like fun, it's exciting, it's getting you to your goal. It's not the end of the game, right? Like it's not there's still like there's still the month, quarter, year to hit, but it's just one meeting, right? You still got this goal to hit.
Right.
But like I always feel that the same way as like when you score a goal, as you do when you book a meeting. It's like yes, like that was awesome. Like and you're not done by any means, but I I really enjoy those moments, especially like when you try something new or something risky.
So it's in a sense, would you say that it's kind of like a BDR position, except without hitting the aggressive quotas?
Yeah, 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 I think it's very hand in hand, like the BDR and the demand gen role. And demand gen should like in all my demand gen roles, I've worked so closely with the SDR team or BDR team.
Mm,
The reason being is because in B2B, every lead or activity has to have a human interaction eventually, right? Even if it's
mhm.
someone requesting a demo, right? You gotta reach out and pick up the phone and say, hey, I saw you
Right.
request a demo. So in all of these campaigns, the SDRs are like they're pivotal. Like if if they are not performing correctly or they're not doing their job to the best ability, like if they're not succeeding, you're not succeeding as a demand gen person. So
Mm,
investing the time to like work with them and like set things up in a way where it's as easy as possible for them to know what to do, to have good copy to follow up with, to clearly understand like what the campaign is and how they should follow up. It's so important. And those two functions, like they're almost like they're not the same function, but they're really interconnected.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think it has that same. It's similar conceptually, where like you have to hit a goal. You're using words, right? Like you're
Right.
using communication to do it, and you have to use like numbers and strategy and test things to figure out what works. So yeah, I think it's extremely similar, and that's I think I actually think being an SDR really helped me become a better demand gen person, because you got
Interesting.
to see
Yeah.
that perspective. You got to see that perspective. And I think the other thing about being an SDR, and then going to demand gen is, if you've done the role, as an SDR, like you just want good leads, you want the right leads, like the decision makers your company's going after. You want, like, ideally you want them warm,
Yeah.
and you just want to book the meeting, right? You just want to get the meeting and the opportunity and like hit your goal for the month. So
Totally.
like everything else, that's sometimes marketers like, and I don't mean to discount, like, there's a lot of things going on in the background that are long term, but like, if like, I don't know, for example, like if you create a blog post, like the SDR doesn't care that much, right? They're like, okay,
Totally.
but how am I
Yeah.
gonna how am I gonna get the meeting? And I think when you think the way they do, then you can like, and I think blog posts and all that stuff and brand building is important. I'm not taking away from that, but like I think once you can think like they do, then you're like, okay, how do I get them better leads? How do I get them the right people? How do I set them up so that it's so easy for them to book this meeting? And then if they're successful, you're successful. So it's an extremely
Hmm. What have
it's
you
the
what
two
have
goals are so interconnected.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, 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 it's good. They are interconnected. It's like sales and marketing, right? So, my
Totally.
thing my thing I was gonna ask is, what have you found to be the most helpful to a SDR or BDR? Same thing to me, but what has been the most helpful to them when they're like, "Hey, Scott, I appreciate this. This helps a ton on booking meetings."
Yeah. So I mean, a lot of SDR teams, without marketing support, right? They have to hit their goal no matter what. So um, that could be, that most of that is done cold, right? Just like getting a
Mhm.
list of prospects, and reaching out, calling, and it definitely works, but it's a lower conversion rate.
Right.
So I think what's been best when I've worked with SDR teams is to come up with strategies to make it easier for them to book meetings.
Mm.
And I think that's where marketing comes in. So, a basic example is like you create a guide, right? And like, and you get like all these people to download the guide, then you pass them over, right? And like
Mhm.
for the SDR, right, it's a much easier way to follow up, right? Instead of just being like this random person, you
Right.
can call and say like, "Hey, I saw you download this guide on how to improve your website, right? Like, I'm curious if you're interested in learning more about how we help." Like something like that, right? It's a much
Right,
easier
right.
conversation. It's warmer. So I think finding the ways to make it easier for them is the key. And I think there's a bunch of ways you can do that. One is through content. Um, I've actually deployed a lot of direct mail campaigns
Mm.
in the past, where we actually send like physical
Yeah, yeah,
tins of
yeah.
like cookies to people.
Oh,
Um,
nice. You gotta send me some.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. Well, if we want to book a meeting with, no, I'm kidding. Yeah, but it's mind blowing how that works. How simple it is, but it's just doing these things that hopefully make it a little easier when you reach out, right?
Yeah.
Like if I send you a tin of cookies and you love cookies and you're like, these are really good,
Mhm.
it's something different that I'm doing, um,
Right. It's
against like
kind of it's kind
all
of
the
like going into product marketing and advertising in itself, like promotional marketing.
yeah, yeah, in a way. But I
But
think what it like, especially with the direct mail stuff, I think it's just a way to like provide a little bit of value, and like, you're
right.
probably getting berated with like emails from salespeople all the time, right? Just like
All the
saying, hey,
time, even on LinkedIn, all the time.
all the time, right? Like you're probably like, it's people saying, hey, please check out my product. Right? Like I have a quota. Please check out my
Desperate,
product.
desperate, especially now end of month, right?
Right, right. So when you do something like sending direct mail or a gift or a tin of cookies,
Yeah,
it's just kind of like I think it just throws people off guard a little bit. It's like, huh, like they did something nice for me,
it's personal.
and then like yeah, and then you like then when the SDR reaches out, it's not like it's like, hey, did you get that tin of cookies I sent you? And people a lot of times people are like, oh yeah, that was like thank you for that. Like,
Mhm.
and then what it does, it just like puts their guard down, and then you can at least have a conversation, regardless of if your software is the right fit for them or it's the right time.
Mhm.
Um, but it's things like that that I think just make their job easier. So I think they have such a tough job. Whenever you can do
Right.
things that make it easier and can produce results for them, then you start like they start being like, okay, like I like demand gen. They're like they're helping us. So that's what I think helps make it easy. It's just like thinking
I
about how
like
you can
that.
just be a little more creative.
Yeah. And I think you're the first demand gen, I'm sure there's a lot of them out there that go that extra step and will send cookies, right? Or a gift. Where I'm thinking that's the salesperson's job to do that and nurture leads, prospects, clients. Like, so it's interesting because you're basically going above and beyond in order to help the SDR, right? And then what you're also mentioning is giving them like a guide or even templates. Here's some templates that I put together. Just save it, paste it, copy paste it, personalize it.
Yeah, totally. That's a big part too that I didn't mention is like, right, the follow up is so important.
Right.
That like you got to also set them up for success there too. So like if you run a webinar,
Mm,
um, and you just say, hey, like we ran a webinar, here are the leads, like go do your thing. They're going to be like, well, what was the webinar about? Like what is important about it that relates to me reaching out? How do I reach out? Um, and
yeah.
like if you don't, if you like, they'll either end up doing two, um, or they just won't do it, right? They'll be like, I'm confused. I have a lot of things to do. I have a goal I have to hit. Like
Mm,
I'm just not gonna do this. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing where I know I can get meetings. So a big part also, like if you're running a webinar, for example, is like really setting them up for success. So
right.
if you have a CRM, right, like making sure like the leads are routed to them in their name, like there's an easy place for them to just like take them and start reaching out. Making sure that, like you said, making sure the messaging is there. Like a lot of times I write the cadence. Um,
Mm,
and I'm open to them. Like if they're like, hey, I don't want to say this. Like I'm like, yeah,
right.
like change it. But hey, just like here's some emails and some like talk tracks that you can use. So you want to basically tee it up in a way where like it's so hard for them not to do what
Mhm,
they need to do to be successful.
right.
And that's a big part of it. So yeah, I agree. I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, and it also brings me up more questions, which is, and it helps that you have a sales background too. Like a lot of marketers have a sales background. So if you're, let's just say, giving cookies, that's the only thing that stuck to my mind, which I love because it's very personal. You're going above and beyond. Your sales background is helping you tremendously to help you be successful, and your SDR be successful. You're helping the SDR as well too, right? Would you think, and it doesn't have to be with you, this could be for all demand gen specialists, is shouldn't demand gen professionals get paid commission?
Yeah,
If they're, yeah, go ahead.
they 100% should. The question is, what do you compensate them on? And a lot of times you'll see businesses compensate on like MQLs or leads, and I think that's wrong. That's not
Mm,
that's like a marketing view. Well, it can depend on the business, but I think that's wrong. I think ultimately it should be either compensated on sales pipeline, like an actual number.
mhm,
And honestly, and this might be an unpopular opinion, I think it should act like it should either be pipeline, a combination of pipeline and revenue, or it should just be revenue. Like, and honestly, like in my head, I think it should just be revenue. Because I think a problem, and I've done this, so I'm not judging anyone. A problem sometimes, even with demand gen, even though you're more results focused,
mhm,
you don't really see things through to the end. And ultimately, what matters for the business is like, does something close, right?
right,
Does it generate business for you? So even like, I mean, pipeline is obviously really good because it's a leading indicator of
right,
revenue, but it's interesting sometimes when you look back at like the data and like you'll see like so little of like your leads closed into deals.
Mm,
And I think when demand gen just marketers are incentivized on revenue, there's a couple really good benefits. Like one is you should be aligned with your sales team, right? Like if you are focused on revenue, then
right.
like you getting a demo request from a garbage account, it's not a
Yeah.
win, right? And it shouldn't be a win, right? It's essentially useless. It's useless to the business,
Right.
but but not all marketers see it that way, right? Because if you have an MQL goal or like a hot lead goal or demo request goal, then you get one in, you're like, all right, cool, counts towards my goal, even though it's going to
Yeah.
provide absolutely zero value to the business.
Mm,
And then the second thing is you start thinking like the salesperson, right? And you start thinking like, okay, well, like I need to make sure the right accounts are talking to us, right? Because those are the ones that are going to close.
mhm.
If people are talking to us, how can I help the sales team to close more deals, right? Can I write content that'll help them, right? Can we get more case studies? You start thinking bottom of funnel as well, not just top. And I think a lot of times demand gen people just think top, and I've done that before. Like I've just
Right,
been like,
right.
cool, like pipeline, but like it doesn't close, right? And like there's value in talking to these people, but not much, right? It needs to close. So I would argue that that demand gen people should be only compensated on revenue, because then you're
Mhm.
like completely aligned. And I
Right.
think some people would like push back and say, um, they would say, oh well, like, but they don't, the salesperson affects revenue is too far down the funnel. They won't see the fruits of their labor. And I get that, but I also think like if you if you're very data driven and you're a good demand gen person, you just inherently know that like, right, if your team's close rate is 30%, then
Mhm.
you need 3x the pipeline to hit that revenue goal. So like you still have to drive towards
Right.
the pipeline goal. Um, but you're also really thinking about like, okay, and how do I get these over the finish line?
Right. And I know for statistics, or data is when you look at it and it's like lead source, Google. And yeah, and then it's closed deal, right? But that came from your efforts. That's really hard, right? At the same time. Have you ever had
Totally.
to deal with something like that?
Uh, yeah. I mean, well, what is the question, like dealing with like understanding where it came from, or just like,
Understanding where it came from, to me, the software that I think about is HubSpot. It's not very in depth with the analytics and the lead source and where it came from. It'll say it came from Google, right? And then from there, it's like social media, but it's like, okay, it came from Facebook, but then it's like there's so many marketing efforts and strategies that are going on. It's like, which one did it really come from? So because we have to see how to tweak this stuff.
yeah, this is like, it's a huge challenge for everyone, including
It's an
myself.
ongoing
Like,
thing.
yeah, you'll never like fully know, right?
Yeah.
Because to your point, like, how do you track one of your customers telling a friend that they should check you out, right? Like,
Right.
you're never gonna see that, right? Like, so there's all these efforts going on in the background. So my thought on it is like, don't don't over index on it and like get too in the weeds with attribution, because it's just so hard, right? Like there's so many things you can't pinpoint.
Hmm.
However, I do think there are things you can look at. um One is, right, the first touch, right? Like where did it get sourced? Two is like the actual channel um that the lead came through, where they
Hmm.
converted on your website. And then the third thing I would say is if you do have some type of attribution tool, you can just look at it holistically and like across like all touch points, like just see like what's touching the most revenue. And I really like that first touch and the lead conversion. I think though, especially from a demand gen perspective, it's interesting because
Hmm.
obviously the way they filled out the form is important. But a lot of times what you'll see, like if you look at your Google Analytics, and like this has happened to me all the time, um, is like it's usually like 2 to 3 touch points before they convert. It's very rare that it's the first time. So understanding what that first touch is interesting. Like a lot of times people like, and I'll like I've even done this. I've been like, oh, like Google AdWords isn't working. Like we're just not
Right.
seeing people convert. But then if you look at analytics, you'll see like, oh well, like they actually did click on one of our ads. They they went to the site, they left, and then they came direct. So
Mhm.
you'll see that so many times. And so I think it's good to give more of a story than just like where did it convert or where was the first touch. Um, and then the second thing to what I said is like just like what is touch like at a holistic level, like of like revenue, like
Right.
that's getting generated, like what is touching across the entire funnel, right? Is it a white paper? Is it a case study? Like I think seeing those things they give you a good indication of like, okay, this is helping or it's not, right? If it's doing none of it, then it's like, okay, like
Right.
just stop. Um, but it's a hard thing. It's a really hard thing. Another example that comes to my mind is at my last company, one of the businesses I helped with, um, from a direct conversion perspective, AdWords was working very well.
Mm.
From a direct conversion perspective, LinkedIn was getting no attribution to anything. And I was spending equally on both those channels. So I was like, this is a no-brainer. Shut off LinkedIn and just double the AdWords spend.
Yeah.
And it didn't actually end up improving results. It actually ended up worsening it. And what we like found when we dug into things was a lot of times these people coming through AdWords, it was their second or third interaction with us. So and we're not for sure certain on this, but what we concluded is like maybe that LinkedIn remarketing was actually
Mhm.
doing something, right? We just couldn't really see it, but just
Right.
being top of mind with these people got them back.
Top of mind is
So
everything.
right, and and that was something I couldn't measure it, right? And honestly, I might have been wrong, but like it made a lot of sense, right? Because then we turned it back on and things kind of went the way. So like it's just really hard. I think the another good thing to do is just like look at it in aggregate, right? Because you have this whole digital strategy, right, across like
Mhm.
all these channels, whether it's Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, Capterra, right? Like you're doing all these things, and they all kind of play into each other, right? Like you might be looking for a CRM, right? Like HubSpot, and like you go to like G2 Crowd or Capterra, right? And you start looking
Mhm.
at like, okay, what are the best ones, right? Then
Right.
you're like, okay, that's interesting. I didn't know HubSpot was like a top one. Cool. Then you start getting like remarketing ads, right? Then you click on it, you learn more. Then you get like another one, and like, right? And then all of a sudden you're talking to their sales team. So um, I think looking at it holistically and saying like, hey, look, here's everything I spent,
Mhm.
and here's everything I got returned from it is a much better gauge of like, hey, is what I'm doing working or is it not?
Yeah. I was also thinking about how important it is then for a demand generation professional to be in those weekly sales meetings, to be in those quarterly sales meetings, to understand the revenue goals, to understand the quota, even though they're not being put on a quota, quarterly quota. I just think it's valuable just to be in there. Hey, what works? What doesn't work? How are they, finding their leads? Is there anything that I can do to support? You know, etc. Right. And another thing I was going to mention is you mentioned copywriting, right?
Hmm.
I think it's important for demand gen professionals, but really all B2B marketing professionals to one, learn how to be really good at copywriting, take a course, read books, or hire a copywriter that actually does the research and can back it up with data and can write phenomenal copy. Um, have you seen like, hey, definitely a requirement to know copywriting or be good at copywriting, or you've seen more? I guess it depends on how big the marketing department is, right? Because there's people that outsource copywriting, right?
Yeah, I've never been in a business where they outsourced it. I think I think it's necessary, right, to be successful in the role. Like again, demand gen is getting people to right, like attend the webinar, download the
Right.
guide, request a demo, and in all those instances, you're selling something, right? Whether it's like
Totally.
right, you might not feel like it, right, but you're selling the guide, right? It's like
Hmm.
so if you can't communicate why someone should read it and what's in it for them, then like you're not going to get as many people downloading the guide, right? And that's going to lead to less people taking a demo with you, and it's going to lead to you missing your goals. So
Hmm.
it's so important, and I've seen it so many times where like people will just like if you're doing a webinar, like they'll just list like what they're going to talk about,
Right.
but they won't take it a step further and say like, here's how, like, here's why this will help you, right? Like,
Mm.
so they'll just be like, all right, like the webinar on website fundamentals, you'll learn like like what's WordPress, like I don't know how to set up WordPress, like, and I guess those are kind of valuable in a way, but like you could always take it a step further, right, and be like what's WordPress, and like why will it enable you to like generate like tons of organic traffic, right?
Right.
Like you know what I'm saying. You can always take it that step further. That really like um, is geared towards an outcome,
Mhm.
and I see a lot of people not doing that, and it's gonna hurt their results, right? So I think yeah, I think it's so important. I think it's a skill that is I actually think it's under I don't know what the word is, like it's underrated. It's not valued enough in
Underrated,
B2B
yeah.
because we're so numbers focused sometimes that like
Right.
we forget that like these are humans who are like you know who like
Humans
need to be
talking to
persuaded.
humans.
Yeah, and you gotta be like persuasive, and I think if you can understand your customer really well and understand what makes them tick, then like
Yeah, yeah.
everything else is just gonna be a lot easier.
What has been, because yeah, you've done webinars, ads, all these things. What has been the most helpful keywords to hook them?
It depends on, obviously depends on the business. Whenever you can use numbers, that's important, right? Like if I say to you, I could say to you like how to save, time building your website, or it's like how you can save 5 hours a day building your, what I'm saying.
Right.
Specificity, I think is impactful. I think the biggest thing again is to like take it a step further. I think a lot of times there's like a benefit and then there's an outcome. So I think like if the benefit is getting more leads, like I think asking the next question and being like, okay, what is getting more leads ultimately help you do? And it's like maybe it's like,
Right.
well, generating revenue. And like what does generating revenue help you do? And it's like makes you look like a star in front of your boss, right? It's like,
Mhm.
okay, that's the real like reason we're going for, and being able to talk to that, right? Like that
Right.
maybe the like
How to be a rock star.
right, how to like be a rock star for your boss using Google ads, right? Then it's like,
Right,
okay,
right.
now you're talking to something deep, right? So
Right, right,
I think the biggest thing is just taking it a step further. Because a lot of people just start at that first part, right? Just
right,
like how to get leads, right? Which like is persuasive, but that deeper stuff, and if you know it, then it's like, okay, like that's where you're
right.
gonna get someone's attention.
It's almost like you gotta hit their, pressure points.
Totally. Um, yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Um, yeah, that's what comes to mind. I'm trying to think of like in my current business, NYSHEX right now. Um, there's a lot going on right now with like supply chain disruptions. I'm sure you've seen like the news with like the Suez Canal and like
Right.
maybe some of the port congestion in Long Beach. Um, big things are like around supply chain disruptions, like enhancing supply chain reliability. Supply chain resilience is a big thing in our business. So like using those words,
Right.
how to
Those are good
improve
keywords.
resilience. Yeah, those seem to tick with our audience.
Resilient and adaptable.
Yep.
There you go.
Resilience is
So
the name of the game.
yeah, yeah. So out of all the demand generation strategies that you've done over the years, what has been the most effective strategy for you?
Yeah, it really depends on the business. So a
Right.
lot of companies I've worked with are heavily like account based marketing plays. We went after the top end of the industry. It was a finite market. There weren't that many accounts, so doing more account based strategies were successful at that. So I guess if you're working in a business where you know everyone in your market, um, going after the larger customers is more profitable and beneficial to your business than going with some account based marketing strategies. I think is the move. And some of the ones that have worked well are direct mail, like I mentioned. That works surprisingly well.
It
There are
is.
there are some downsides to it because sometimes people will just take a meeting with you because they'll be like, "Well, you just sent me a gift, so I'm
I feel obligated to.
yeah, yeah." So that happens, but it also there's people who will hear you out and have a need for it. So
Mm.
that one has worked extremely well. It hasn't worked well now because most people aren't in the office, but
That was
when
another
people are
question I was gonna ask you is how do you get their address when they're all working fully remote?
yeah that's to be honest, it's been a struggle and like we tried it. We tried there's now some of these tools are they have an e-gift component now where like you can like send them an email saying you like I want we want to send you a gift and then like confirm your address and you can send
Mm.
it. It didn't work well. I think people just like were like, what is this and like why are they like is
Yeah,
this a
yeah.
scam? But in the I guess when if people go back to the office, that's a good strategy. And then the other thing we've been doing from an account based strategy is um, we've been doing these roundtables where we make them like very exclusive. So
Hmm.
they're people having discussions. We bring in a speaker who's like very reputable, and we've been telling our customers, and this is the truth. Like we say, hey, this is like an exclusive event. We're only inviting like VPs of supply chain at a top company. Like this isn't for everyone, so like
Mhm.
let us know because we only have so many spots.
Invite only.
Um, yeah, and then we also try to add that on with a really cool speaker to just like kind of show like
And this is your
uh,
guys' webinars, right?
yeah, and
Nice.
and that worked really well.
Yeah.
I think I think like a lot of times in demand gen you think, oh, I need like thousands of people here, but sometimes you don't, right? Like if you can get like
No.
15 massive accounts to show up, right? Like and you close 5 of them or like that, it's a big win, right?
Right.
So
Very targeted.
so I think yeah, so I think thinking of those extremely targeted ways to like do something special for the people you want to get in front of the most, like that's been really successful.
Mhm.
But then in other businesses, like one of the businesses I worked for in my last company was called Equity Effect. It was like a cap table management software, and and because cap table software is an existing, it's like people know about it, it's like an existing category. There's a lot of opportunity to do SEO. There was a lot of opportunity for like that where Google AdWords was working. Capterra was a big driver, um, and those things are nice because like to me those are more like systematic um, approaches. So like
Mm.
right if if cap table management software right if we're bidding on that and we're getting 5 opportunities a month from that,
Mm.
like I don't have to like I don't have to do that much to like
Right.
to maintain that, right? And honestly, there's some easy ways to maybe get more out of it, right? I can just like spend more on it. I can like A/B test the ad copy there. I can like try to tighten the targeting. So what's nice about those frameworks is like they're more systems, right? So like when you build these systems, then it's easier to improve them, and it's less work to maintain. A lot of these account based things I'm talking about, you have to like
Right.
keep doing them, right? They take work, and like um, if I went on vacation for 4 weeks, right, it would just stop, right? It wouldn't necessarily keep up.
Right.
But like with something like AdWords or like SEO and like they dip and change at times, but like some like in that business, I did feel like sometimes I could like take a week or two off and like things wouldn't really change because there's these
Mm.
systems in place that are consistent.
Right, right.
So depending on the makeup of your addressable market and like who you're focused on, like I think both those approaches work. And honestly, like the best strategy I think is doing both of those things, right? Like creating that system that is getting you repeatable results, but then on top of that, layering in account base where like you're getting larger opportunities with more high value clients. I think like you really gotta be doing both.
Yeah. One idea that came to mind, you might already be doing this, is getting their mailing address for the webinars or even a podcast interview. I mean, I'm not doing this, but now I'm considering it. Is like if I sent you, an email and you said, or a message on LinkedIn and you said, yeah, would love to be on the show. I'm like, great, I'm excited to have you on. And then kind of like, here's a link, Google form or more something more professional than that. Maybe it's a site link and it should basically ask for, you know, important information, or I ask you questions that I'm going to ask you during the podcast interview. But then it says something like, what's your mailing address so we can send you a gift? And if we don't want to make them feel obligated. I say, what's your address so I can send you some free swag? Who doesn't want free swag?
Yeah.
Like, that's a good way to get someone's mailing address. Just an idea that came top of mind right now.
Yeah, and actually what we used to do, when people were in the office is we'd actually have the SDRs, like, call the office,
Hmm.
and, you would get, like, a secretary, and you would like, we would be like, "Hey, I wanna send, like, Jesus a gift, I just wanna confirm that he still works in this office." And they would just be like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, he works," like, 'cause to your point, it's like, it's not like, "Hey, I wanna go to Jesus's office," like,
Right.
it's more
Right.
just like, "Hey, I wanna send him a gift," like, I'm just confirming that he works here, and they'll be like, "Yeah, yeah, he works here," so
Totally.
that's
They want to make sure that gift is handed to the right person.
right,
It's not just sitting in their office that's vacant.
but to your point, like, saying, like, like, "Hey, I'm sending like, I'm gonna send you something valuable," right? Like,
Right.
that's totally different than, "Hey, I want your address so I can put it in my CRM and I know where you
Right.
live," right? So
Right. And then people would appreciate the free swag, right? Or even if you're,
totally.
say, straightforward, we're going to send you a gift. I mean, that's awesome. They already are, have expressed interest in signing up for the webinar. So that just takes it a step further to do the ongoing follow up and nurturing, right? So I love that. That just gave me ideas, even when doing podcast interviews like these, right? Um, Another question that I have is, what's a commonly held belief in B2B marketing that you passionately disagree with?
I think the biggest thing that bothers me is when people think that, that your audience, like, doesn't want anything that's, like, entertaining or, like, cutesy or, like, anything creative. They're like, "No, no, no, like, you're selling to 60-year-old white dudes, like, they don't want that," and, like, I think that is complete crap. I think,
Mm.
we're all humans, we all, like, watch Netflix and, like, reality, right? Like, we all like entertainment, and I think, like, B2B is traditionally, like, extremely boring, right? It's extremely like, "Here's a blog post on 5 ways you can generate more leads," or, "Here's a blog post on the RO," right? It's like, everyone thinks that, like, it's like logic first, which I think is not true. I think it's emotion. People, like, buy with emotion, then rationalize with logic. So, like, to think that your audience doesn't like, obviously you need to be informative and be a thought leader, but, like, to not make that entertaining or do things that are funny or do things that are more interesting, like, I think that's, like, it's such a mistake because there's at this point there's so many companies that are, like, trying to get in front of your buyer, and, like, if you're just gonna, like, send them, just a blog post, like, it's just not as engaging. So, like, I think a lot of times, and I've been in businesses where people are like, no, don't do that. Like, let's not rock the boat. Let's not, like, right. Like, and I think that's the biggest mistake, right? Because it's just, you're just conforming to what everyone else is doing. So I think the companies, and there's companies that are doing it right, that are, like, wildly succeeding,
Well,
that are, like, doing things differently, being a little more personable, doing creative things, like, thinking a little bit outside the box, and, like, not that much, not like crazy creativity, just like a little bit outside of what normal companies are doing. I think they're, like, getting a lot of attention. I think a good example, and one that I think about a lot, is Drift, the conversational marketing
mhm.
software. They have, like, all these podcasts, their companies, they're doing all these their videos. You, like, learn a lot about their company. They do, like, really creative things. They'll they'll do, like, billboard ads, like, they'll do all these, like, things that are just a little different and more, honestly, more similar to a B2C brand than a B2B brand.
Hmm.
And, right, they've amassed a massive audience and fans. I'll like I'll be honest, like, when we bought Drift at I used it at 2 companies, but I helped be a part of the decision making process, for the first company that I bought at Honest Buildings. And, to be honest, like, I do think there's value in chatbots, but I don't think that was the real reason I bought it. I think I just thought this company was really cool, and I just wanted to be, like, a part of it.
Mhm.
And there's nothing rational about that, right?
No.
Like, it's like buying shoes, right? It's like you just want to, like, look cool. I mean, I guess shoes can have functionality too, but, so I think there's more of an opportunity for companies to do that. at NYSHEX, I've been really trying to push that, and the company has been all about it, which has been awesome. Like we're doing a podcast,
Mhm.
we're creating funny videos, like we're doing things a little differently, like not that much differently, right? Like it's not that hard to do this podcast, but it's
Mhm.
different, right? You're not just posting a blog post on LinkedIn like everyone else, right? You're posting snippets and videos, and like it's more engaging.
Mhm.
So I think that's the big opportunity right now, especially where when the bar is so low. Like just doing a podcast, right? I think that's like a way to
Right.
stand out from your competitors. So that would be my gripe, and that's what I think should change.
I love it. Yeah, I love it, and I completely agree with you too. Lastly, the moment that everyone's been waiting for. Do you have any advice or tips for our audience?
Uh, yeah, I guess as it relates to demand gen, a few things. One I would say is like kind of one of the themes we've talked about is like aligning with your sales team, thinking like a salesperson, thinking like an SDR, and like really thinking about the bottom line outcome of what the business is trying to do. I think marketing sometimes disconnects from that, and I think like that's where the most value comes is when you're like super aligned um, with your sales partners and like really figuring out like, hey, like this is what we're trying to do. These are the type of accounts. This is what I'm gonna go help with. I think that's a recipe for success. The other thing I would say is if you're new to demand gen, it's like a relatively new thing. It's a little vague. I've had people reach out and be like, "How do I like learn more about demand gen?" And
Right.
I think you can't really like demand gen is actually um, it's like a bunch of different skills like put together. So like you need to learn email marketing, right? You need to learn copywriting. You need to learn like SEO. You need to learn account based marketing. You need to learn how to do like LinkedIn ads, Google ads, Facebook ads, right? They're all kind of different. Um, so I think it's really about understanding what are the parts, and specifically, I guess for your business, like what are the things you think will drive results, and then like you got to learn those things individually. So I don't think there's like one. I don't know of a way to just like learn it.
Mhm.
It's like break it down into pieces, start learning different things, testing them, seeing what works, um, and then and yeah, that's how I think you ultimately come up with like a more holistic strategy.
Awesome. Well, Scott, thank you for your time. And I always enjoy having our conversations. I feel like we're always learning and creating new ideas and experimenting with different things. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun.